everybody. Welcome to everybody's favorite day of the week. This is day 4 with the man, Frank Scalish. Frank, how you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing good. My son came in last night from North Carolina with his lovely betrothed, and we stayed up extremely late, hence the dark rings around the eyeballs.
You had a couple, huh?
Yeah, I don't think I'm built for that world anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Kids
All
will
right.
be kids.
Matt, how you doing, man? Live from the farm this morning.
I am. I'm out on the farm. I got my morning coffee. Following the show, we're going to go pick up 400 bales of hay
Yeah.
for
Outstanding.
the horses, which is not a fun thing to do, but it makes you
Yeah.
feel like you're kind of in the country.
Very nice. All right.
You are in the country. There's
Yes,
bugs,
you are.
There's bugs flying around his phone.
Now he went away.
He probably got stung.
He's got to climb up the telephone pole. You remember that in Green Acres?
Yeah.
Sam Drucker's making a call, man. Jeez. All right, real
So is
quick.
Mr. Haney.
Mr. Haney.
Someone sent me a fish picture.
Oh, well, I got a feeling this is going to be going on during the entire
No,
day
it's not.
4.
Here's the problem that we ran into. I chose to use my Traeger. I'll show it to you. I chose to use
What?
my Traeger handle as my phone stop. Right? Well, there's a bunch of flies around the Traeger because everyone knows that a Traeger tastes better if you don't clean it every day.
It's all the protein from the flies, apparently.
Absolutely. So all the fly stuff, all the flies is what you're seeing because I've rested my phone on the Traeger.
Okay.
That's kind of country.
That's pretty country.
That is kind of country. All right, real quick. Obviously, this is day 4, and we're going to get into some stuff with Frank about communicating and listening to what the fish tell you today. So we're going to get into that for a minute. But first, man, the instant feedback and the comments is blowing up. Look, folks, I'm going to tell you right now. The only thing we know about this MLF situation is what we've read on the internet. I haven't talked to anybody. I just know what's going on.
Here's what we know. There were 7 guys that are not competing this week. Ruck's had an emergency statement. I've checked all their social media. Fletcher Shryock did have a post 14 hours ago that said following ICAST, he came down with COVID. He was hospitalized from it. He says, based on his Instagram post, that he feels like he is getting better and is looking forward to returning.
That's
Other
what we
than
know.
that, who knows what's going on with everybody else? Does that fall under the HIPPO guidelines, Mark?
Pretty much. I mean, they're not allowed to release any information because of HIPAA. So
Okay.
we don't know anything else, man. What you guys know, we know. I don't know if you think I got some direct line with what's going on with all the COVID situations in New York, but it is what it is. That's what we know. We're ready for Frank. Let's move on.
Safe.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about, Frank?
Listening to the bass. I mean, this is real bass talk right here because you're listening to the fish, and I talk to a lot of people, and when people tell me that they're having a hard time establishing patterns or figuring out what's going on. Okay, the first question I ask them is, did you catch any fish? And they said, yeah, I only caught 3. And I said, well, how did you catch them? And I was throwing this, or I was doing that, or I was doing this. Well, how did the bass bite it? I don't know. They ate it. Well, you got to know how they took that bait. You know what I mean? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some examples of what the fish tell you, and then I'm going to relate it to a story. Okay.
Cool.
So
right.
My first example, since we were hot on the Carolina rig, and Matt's probably sick of hearing about the Carolina rig.
Keep doing it. There's multiple guys that have cashed. There was a top 10, I believe, on the St. Lawrence River in the pro circuit of an angler who threw a Carolina rig.
Perfect.
Trait's co-angler in the Open had like 11 pounds behind her on the Carolina rig. There's a photo of her landing like a 5-pound smallmouth with the ball and chain. He had like a 9-foot leader. Anyway.
Okay, so we're going to use the Carolina rig as my first example. So, and I'll relate it to a tournament I was in. So I was in this tournament and I was catching all my fish on Carolina rigs. And we had a limit, but it wasn't a great limit, and surely not a winning limit. But we were catching fish all day long. Little dudes, 1.5 to 2.5 pounders, little guys, and couldn't shake the little fish syndrome. And I kept telling it was a team event, and I kept telling my partner, we're missing something important, because in practice we had big giant fish going, and now we can't catch anything over 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds. So we literally have about 20 minutes left in the day. I had a milk run of offshore spots that I was running around to. We get to the last one and I cast out on the break and working that Carolina rig. I don't usually pull them straight off the break. I usually 60 degree, 45 degree, because I want it working down the break if they're not on top of the structure. So I do this and I get a bite and I miss the fish. It was a funky bite, and I'm reeling the thing back in to make another cast, and I get right to the side of the boat, and this 3-pounder comes up and smokes at the bait. I immediately dropped the Carolina rig, turned around and picked up I was throwing a fat-free 7 that particular day in Tennessee shad. I immediately picked that bait up and I fired it out there, and boom, I get a 4-pounder. Reel them in, throw them in the boat, unhook them, and I just threw them in the bottom of the boat. I told my non-boater, I told my partner, call them fish. I got a line. So I throw back out there again. I catch another one. He calls another one. I do that 5 times in a row, call every single fish we had, and we come in and we win the event. And the whole key was paying attention to what the fish were telling me. The fact that bass ran my Carolina rig down while I was reeling it in meant that the bigger fish were not feeding from the bottom. So that's when I switched to the crankbait. Okay. So if I was not paying attention and turned around and said, oh, dude, did you see that? I almost got him. He ran it down, and then threw the Carolina rig back out there, we don't even come close to winning that tournament. So that's one example of how these fish tell you. The fish will tell you what you need to know. You just have to be paying attention to decipher that stuff. Now, here's another example. When you go punching, okay, punching is a good example. So you go in, you see the mats, you look at the mats. Now, when I punch, I look for a couple different things, mostly bottom composition. And I'm giving like little tiny snippets of what you're looking for, but there's examples here. So I look for little high spots under the mat or little depressions under the mat. These are high percentage areas. Okay. So we go in there, and I was with my son that day, and we were punching, we were throwing up into the mat far, punching in, and we were smashing them, but we were catching all 2-pound fish, 1.5-pound fish. So I said, the big fish aren't in this shallow grass. We need to find deeper grass. All we're catching is little stuff. So sure enough, I come around the corner and I see a couple isolated grass patches over 6-7 feet of water. I pitch in the center of the one, let it go down, and my line stops, and I lean on the fish, and I got a 5-pounder. So I said, okay, all the big fish want the isolated pods of grass deeper. Okay, so now I'm paying attention to what the fish are telling me. The smaller fish want to be up shallow in the mats. The bigger fish want to be out deeper in the mats. So the rest of the day, all we focused on was grass that was in deeper water. And I never made a pitch up towards shallow water. I just pretty much almost vertically plunked and dunked in front of the boat. And we wound up catching a bunch of 4s, some 5s. I got one 6.5-pounder doing that. And so the bass, again, here, I trying to figure patterns out, guys. This is a big part of it. Catching the little fish, knowing it's not enough to win an event, I had to make an adjustment somehow. So I assumed that the bigger bass would be and the deeper stuff. And it turned out to be true, but not only was it the deeper stuff, it was the isolated ones. So again, paying attention to what the fish are telling you is critical. You know, the other thing is with crankbait fishing. When do you go from the crankbait to the rig? or to a football jig. So here's the perfect way to tell. So if I'm dredging with a crankbait, okay, and I get one, doom, and he comes flying out of the water, jumps, and the crankbait goes flying out of his mouth. People go, oh man, I lost him. It's crankbait fishing. That's just what happens. But what really happened? If it happens again, you have to understand something. Your crankbait's digging in the bottom. The bass is a little bit above the bottom, and he takes the bait from the top. He's not taking it from underneath. He's taking it from the top, so that he doesn't have any hooks in his mouth. He's holding on to it because he thinks it's real. He comes flying up out of the water, jumps, and your crankbait goes flying. So that's an indication to me that I need to get the Carolina rig down there so my bait's hovering above the bottom as I'm dragging it, and the fish can take the soft plastic better. That's turning a day that could be a very bad day or a very unproductive day into a fish catching day and a live well full of fish. So again, you got to pay attention. These fish will tell you everything that you need to know, and you have to pay attention, because usually the first fish, it's not an accident that you caught it. But if you don't recognize what it's telling you, you can't capitalize on it. You now then have to catch another one, and hopefully that it registers on how you're catching them. And it's the same thing with location. The other day I was doing a Carolina rig show, and I found some rock piles on the real flat side of this lake. No main river channels, no nothing. It's just dish bowly, but it had some bumps on it. And I went to the bumps to fish the bumps, and I didn't catch anything on them. And it was good rock. And so my camera guy goes, what are we going to do? I said, well, we're just going to go to where the main river channel is, because that just means they're not up in this flat stuff. We got to get to real structure. So I went to the main river channel, and we smashed them. It was like we were on a completely different lake. So even not catching a bass can tell you a lot. You know what I'm saying? This is what I mean by bass talk and paying attention to what's going on out there. You just got to really be focused on what you're doing. If you're just going out fishing and you're just casting and hoping to catch some, if you guess properly, you'll catch them. If you don't guess properly, you're not going to catch them, but you're never going to catch them that day because you're off base. So it's always paying attention. Blowdowns, perfect example. Oh, I got a really good story too. So blowdowns, okay? So when you flip blowdowns or throw square bills on blowdowns, for example, a lot of guys go, oh yeah, we're catching them on blowdowns. And guy goes, man, I'm fishing blowdowns all day. I'm not catching anything. Well, the guy that said I'm catching them on blowdowns, he might be targeting the root ball against the bank. And that's where the fish are at. The guy that's not catching them might be in the branches outside on the deeper edge. Conversely, could have been the opposite way around. Or the fish could have wanted the first split in the tree trunk. You know how the trees come out and then they split into the branches? They could want that first split in the tree trunk. So you have to pay attention to where the bass comes from in that blowdown. So I was on this lake, and my buddy said, yeah, the flipping bite's pretty good. It was summertime. I went out there to do football jigs, and he goes, yeah, the flipping bite was pretty good. So I went out there to my rock piles and started dragging football jigs around, and I wasn't really catching many. I caught a few, but I didn't catch enough. So I said, well, let me go flipping. So I go down to one stretch of bank. It's got a bunch of stuff on it, bushy stuff, blowdowns. It's got a lot of different things. And I'm going down the bank, and I catch a 1-pounder, and I'm going down the bank. And there's a pine tree that had fallen over, and it still had the green stuff on it. And I flip in there, and I catch a 4-pounder. I'm like, uh-oh. So immediately I just started scanning the bank, and I saw 2 or 3 more pine trees with the green needles on them. So I just ran to the pine trees with the green needles on them, and I turned a real crappy day into a huge limit because those fish wanted that green stuff on that tree. And every one I went to, I caught a behemoth off of. It was paying attention. Yes, I caught a couple little fish flipping all the odd and end stuff, but the minute I got to the pine tree with the green, I caught a big one. So then I just focused on pine trees with the green stuff on them, and I caught them all day long on every pine tree I fished that had green stuff on it. So that's another thing. You're paying attention. You got to pay attention to what the bass are telling you. And I know a lot of guys that would have caught a big one on that pine tree, and then they're flipping fish, man, and just keep on going down the bank, keep on flipping. Before you know it, the day's over. They got one slug and 4 little bitty ones, and they could have turned that day into a huge day. Again, it's paying attention to what the fish are telling you. So my one buddy called me up one day, and I was still running Bassmasters, so I didn't have a lot of time to fish at home. In fact, when I fished Bassmasters, I literally didn't fish a lake in Ohio for 15 years. So he calls me up. He called me Hank. He didn't call me Frank. He called me Hank. He said, "Hey, Hank," he goes, "I got a tournament coming in. You want to practice with me?" And I go, "Yeah, sure, I'll practice." So he tells me the lake he's on. So I grabbed 3 flipping sticks and a spinnerbait. It's an early season tournament, and the lake's full of flooded willows. It's just a massive flooded willow factory. And so we pull up to this one pocket mouth, and I said, we need to concentrate on stuff near these pocket mouths because these fish are going to want to come up here and spawn pretty soon. So we got to get them because they're not going to be way back up in. Flip into the first willow tree top, bam, catch a 1.5 pounds, or bam, catch another 1.5 pounds. So we go down this little 20-yard stretch of willow trees, and we literally caught a fish in every bush top, and they were all willows. I come to a piece of hardwood. I flip into hardwood. Boink, wham! I set up on him. I got a 4-pounder, and I'm like, "Holy smokes, dude!" I said, "We need to target all the hardwood." And he goes, "What are you talking about? We're catching them, flipping everything." I go, "No. The first biggest fish we caught of the morning was on a hardwood. We need to go concentrate on hardwood." So I started just trolling motor on high, flying down the banks, and anywhere I found a big piece of hardwood, we caught big fish off of it. So I said, these willow trees are going to keep everybody in this tournament busy because they're going to do exactly what you just said. They think they're in the willows, and they caught the big fish on the hardwood, but they didn't separate it. They figured they were just flipping willows, and they caught a big one. You know what I mean? But the reality of it is that if you could eliminate all the little fish by running to the places that you caught the big one, the hardwoods. So he goes, "What should I do in the tournament?" I said, "I'm coming to this weigh-in." I said, "If you fish a willow bush, I'm going to break all your stuff." I said, "You run nothing but hardwoods." So swear to God, I go to the weigh-in. He wins the tournament with 19 pounds, okay? And he did nothing but fish hardwoods the entire day.
Wow.
Now, he didn't catch 100 fish. Okay, he caught like 9 or 10, but he smoked the field. He won by like over 5 pounds. All right, everybody was stuck in the bushes catching them little ones.
Yeah.
Again, it's paying attention to what the fish are telling you. They tell you everything you need to know. You just have to pay attention. If you're fishing and you got the radio on and you're hopping around, or you're thinking about work, or you're thinking about whatever, and you're not thinking about what you're doing, you miss clues that put you on the fish. So this is the thing that I preach the most. I preach this to my kids till I'm blue in the face. If you're out here fishing, put your darn phone down. You can't be paying attention if you're texting your buddies, you know what I mean, or calling your girlfriend. You can't be paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
And then that's the fact. So I got one more example, and then we can open it up to the question line, or you guys can interject whatever you want to do. So so I do a crankbait show, and I just did it. This was like just a few days ago. So I'm fishing offshore, throwing fat-free 7s, and the color of the day, and it changes. The color of the day could change. This was citrus. Okay, so we get the show done. We get all the B-roll done. I cut a video on advanced Carolina rig setup because I had to do a little setup. I mean, we were talking about the double braided knot and everything else. Well, I decided to do a small 1.5-minute video showing the exact setup. So we get all that done. And I look at my cameraman. I'm like, "Joe, what time you got to go?" He's like, "I got to go really soon, man. I have to be out of town. I got to go to Pittsburgh." And I'm like, "Okay, what's soon?" He goes, "Maybe an hour, maybe." I go, let's go back out there and let's catch some crankbait fish for fun before we go home. Cause I only caught like 3 or 4 for the show. And then, usually I just catch 3 or 4 for the show, and then we do all the B-roll and everything else. And then by that time, 2-3 hours goes by. So we go back and he catches the first 4-pounder off this structural element. So I put the boat on spot lock and I start fan casting an area, and I got an angle down, and I'm reeling in, and I bump in the bottom, ticking. All of a sudden I feel the crankbait wants to climb up something. And so I climb it up, and as soon as I broke free from it, I stopped it. Bam! I got him, and I get a huge one. So I'm like, holy smokes, man! So I fire out another cast. I crank it down. As soon as I get to the higher spot and come over the high spot, I stop it again. Boom! I get another one. So I go 5 for 5 casting wise, and didn't have one under 4 pounds. In fact, I even got one over 6 doing this. So Joe's like, why am I casting 10 times to catch one and you're catching them every single cast? I'm like, dude, I'm pausing it after I come over that high spot, and they're smashing it as soon as I pause it. And in like a half an hour, we caught over 20 on that spot. And if we didn't pause it, and actually the reality of it is that I didn't pause it the first time on purpose. I went to get Joe's fish, and I cast out there, and as I hit the high spot, Joe's fish swam by. I leaned down to grab his fish for him, and my rod jolted. And so I was paying attention, and I said, holy smokes, man, that fish hit it at the pause. And that's when I started pausing it and started catching them like a madman. So again, if I wasn't paying attention to that, I would have never started pausing the bait, and we probably wouldn't have caught what we caught over there. So it's paying attention to what those fish are telling you. And that's the real key to this game, guys. I mean, you could tweak a pattern. You can pattern 1-pounders and you can pattern 3-pounders. You know what I'm saying? You have to understand the differences, what the bigger ones want, or how the bigger ones are behaving. And that's how you establish, you say, oh, this guy always catches big fish. Well, he's patterning big fish. He's not patterning small ones. He's trying to figure out how to catch the big ones. He puts the pieces of the puzzle together, and he can eliminate the small bites. Now, conversely, if he needs to catch more, he can go back to doing what he was doing to fill out his limit.
All right, question, Frank. Now,
go for it.
You're probably well aware of the situation, and I wrote 2 things down on this pad because I wanted to make sure I got it right based upon what you said. The situation that you have sometime with magnets, all right? You got a positive and a negative. But when you take 2 positives of 2 magnets, they do this, all right? They won't stick together.
Correct.
Because there's resistance. 2 things I hear on this show a lot. Fish your strengths and listen to what the fish are telling you. Do you think that the average weekend team guy makes a mistake because they continually fish their strengths because they're not confident in doing what the fish are telling them to do? All right.
Well,
and Matt's got a great example. He's got a great example that happened on Pickwick, because what Matt did is Matt really didn't listen because he only fished out, at least what he told me, for like 30 minutes and said, you know what? Screw this. I'm not doing this. I'm going to do what I do well. So he ditched that entire thing, didn't really listen, and went and fished his strengths. So is that a battle with the average angler out there, that even though he might be listening, you fall back to your strengths more than do what the fish are telling you? That's my question.
It's a confidence thing. If you feel super confident doing something, you're probably going to figure out ways to get bid on it, as long as it's relevant to the seasonal patterns. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to figure out ways to get bid on it. May not be the best case scenario for the bigger bites, but it probably is going to put fish in your boat.
Do they get trapped, though? Do you get trapped because you have that confidence? In other words, is confidence more important than listening to what the fish are telling you?
No, it takes both. It's not any one thing. It takes both.
Okay.
It takes both.
Because you can listen to the fish by doing your confidence. So let's say they were on the ledges on Pickwick with a swim bait on a jig head. Like that was the predominant pattern, and I wasn't comfortable with it. I went and took a wacky worm and a drop shot, but I was still listening to the fish because I could have gone up and caught 12 inchers, but I took what I was comfortable and confident with and then tried to listen to the fish based on what my fishing strengths are. Like, I mean, like you take Biffle, for example, like, well, because I just got done with Oneida. When he won on Oneida, do you think he started flipping in 6 inches of crystal clear water back in 2006? I would imagine he probably went to like dirty stuff or went in a canal or something. And he just kept listening and evolving. So that was him fishing his strength, but still listening to the fish and evolving. So, I mean, there's like tons of patterns within the patterns. You don't have to do something you're unfamiliar with. You can still listen to them and do what your strengths are. It might not be the best, but you can make the best out of that scenario. I mean, I think that's how one-trick ponies survive, right? They're one-trick ponies, but they're still way more versatile within their sphere of comfort than people realize.
Yeah, and the thing, too, to remember is there's always shallow bass.
Yeah.
No matter what time of year it is, there's always shallow bass. I prefer fishing offshore. It is my strength. That's where I live. But when I fish shallow, I use my offshore structure fishing knowledge to put me in areas that are shallow that have a good movement of fish, aka drains, little secondary creek channels that run into the bank or run into the pockets. I still pay attention to what structure is down there when I fish shallow. So in a way, I'm taking my deep water strengths and applying them to shallow water fishing. The whole thing here is to remember that whatever you're doing, you have to pay attention to what the bass are telling you, whether you're fishing in 10 inches of water or 30 feet of water. You still have to pay attention to what the fish are telling you. And there's still better ways to catch bigger fish if you're picking up on those clues. So I can't say, right, wrong, or indifferent on it's summertime and we're fishing shallow, or we're on a smallmouth fishery and we're fishing for largemouth. There's no right, wrong, or indifference. The whole premise of this listening to the fish episode here is how to find bigger bites doing what you are doing. And that's the whole premise of this. I can argue to the nth degree that if you're off seasonal pattern, you're probably not winning the event. I can argue that to death.
It's kind of like when Matt and I went one-on-one, and I had it in my mind that I was going to catch fish on a spook. Bottom line. And I went out and I didn't listen to what they were saying. After 30 minutes, I should have went, this probably isn't working.
Right.
I need to do something else.
Yeah, and I watched that video, and Matt was literally pretty much catching them consistently the whole day.
Well, that was editing. Editing.
But I also started out with a spook and a 10-inch worm on deep rock.
Yeah.
And quickly abandoned it.
Right.
But see, that's the mistake of which I made that I was asking you. Is it helpful to bring this up to say, look, yeah, you can still fish your strengths, but at the same time, listen to what they're saying and have the flexibility to be able to make the adjustments based upon what the fish are telling you. Yeah. Don't be stubborn.
Yeah, preconceived notions are the kiss of death. I used to do that a lot. I'd have these preconceived notions of how I'm going to go to this whatever place I'm on and catch them. And so I wind up for the first day of practice running what I have in my head and not running what I should be running based on conditions. And I've hurt myself in a lot of first day practices, especially in the beginning when I was fishing a lot of lakes I've never been on before. I'd be like, oh, it's pre-spawn, they're going to be here and they're going to be there, and I run all this stuff and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not catching anything. Perfect that was the Chesapeake Bay. I never seen the Chesapeake Bay before, but I've heard there's grass everywhere and you got to be fishing in the grass and blah blah blah, and I think it was February. I don't even remember when we were there. But anyhow, so I go and I spend a couple of days fishing all this grass stuff and fishing everything that you're supposed to fish to catch largemouth. And I'm not catching anything. I caught one 12-incher in 2 days. And I'm like going, there's something seriously wrong with this picture. So I said, I need to do something that puts more advantage to me. So I abandoned everything and I ran up the Susquehanna and I fished the current. And then I started catching giant fish. In fact, if I didn't tear my lower unit off the last day of the tournament, I had it won. I mean, I had the tournament won. I mean, I was catching giant fish. I weighed in, 20 plus pounds on day one and had a big bag on day two and just was a couple ounces out of winning it. And the third day of that tournament, the first cast I made, I got a 5.8 and then of course went to go to another rock pile and I hit one. took my lower unit with me and I was done, but I still wound up in third place. That's how good I was catching them. But here, that's a strength thing that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
I knew that if I got in the current, that the current's the easiest thing in the world to fish, that not every bass is going to be in the grass. So I knew that if I can get in the current, fish rock piles, eddies, and current seams, that I have a better chance of catching them. Just so happened it was a massive pattern for good size quality fish. And so there, I mean, that's an idea of fishing your strengths. I was on a place I didn't know. I wasn't doing good what everybody says you're supposed to do there. So I went to where I felt the most comfortable and it paid off.
Balance.
You know what I'm saying?
Balance.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
You have to be, able to maneuver a little bit.
All right. You ready for some questions?
Yeah, and avoid big rock piles.
Yeah, good point. Not good.
No.
All right, here. Let me throw this one up. Frank, if you pull up on a spot during practice and catch a small fish here and there, will you mark it and move on to fish it later in the tournament? Does this mean it holds fish of all sizes?
Well, Joe, the thing is it depends the fishery you're on. If it's Lake Erie and I'm catching small fish on a piece of structure, I might mark the structure if it's a good structural element, but it'll get a D- on my. When I practice for a tournament structure fishing, if I don't catch big fish on it, it gets a C or a D. If I catch 3-pounders, it gets a B. If I'm catching 4 and above, it gets an A+. And so that's how I label my waypoints for the tournament. And then in the tournament, I run all my A+ stuff first. If the A+ stuff starts to wane a little bit, I might hit a B spot or a C- spot, and just to see what's on it. But generally speaking, if I'm catching little ones on that area, I'm probably going to always catch little ones because a couple of days is not enough to move all the little fish off of it and put the big fish on it. So I'm probably not on them. Smallmouth fishing is a little bit different. I've seen guys a million times say to me, "Oh, dude, I'm going to catch 20 pounds or better on this tournament." I go, "How so?" And they go, "I caught like 25 2-pounders and then I got a 4-pounder." And I said, "Well, if you caught 25 2-pounders to catch a 4-pounder, that means you got to catch 125 in the tournament to catch 20 pounds. You follow me?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "What are you talking about?" I go, "Dude, you're not on 4-pounders. You just caught one." You know what I'm saying? The little ones, you can't go through 125 in a day to catch 20 pounds. You can't do it. So will you catch a big one? Maybe. Will you come in with 20? I'll bet no. You know what I mean? I'll bet no. And then I go out in that tournament, and this guy's telling him he's getting 20 to 30 bites a day. So how does he expect to catch 125 in a day if all he's getting is 20 or 30 bites a day? I go out and I catch 7 to 10 fish a day, but they're all 4 to 5 pound smallmouth. So what's the object? The object's to win the game. You know what I mean? So I can live with catching 10 fish. If it's going to put me in the top 3, I can live with that. I don't need to catch 20 or 30. You know what I mean? I need to win the tournament. So, that's part of it.
All right, next question here. Does Frank let's see here. Does Frank have I don't.
It's probably have a list
Frank,
of questions he asks himself when catching bass.
Yeah.
I don't particularly have a list of questions that I purposely ask myself. I just pay attention to everything I'm doing when I'm fishing. And I pay attention to everything, even the animals moving around offshore on land, like deer and coyotes and stuff like that. When I see a lot of animal movement, mammal movement on land, and they're very active, I know the fish are going to be very active. So if I'm not catching them and I see all the wildlife all over the place, then I know I'm doing something really, really wrong. If you had to make questions, I would make a question of what was I fishing exactly when the fish bit it? What was my lure doing exactly when the fish bit it? And how did the fish take the bait? If it was a crankbait, did he have one of the little treble hooks in his mouth, or did he have the whole bait in his mouth? Jerkbait, same thing. Is it jerkbait on the side of his face or in his throat? You know what I mean? These are things that I consciously watch every day. Because if a bass is slapping at a jerkbait, it could be a color issue or it could be a depth issue. Could be a retrieve issue too. You could be not making him want to commit to it. Yeah. So these are things that I look at to see what I have to change up as I'm going. And that's really what I do. I don't have an exact list of questions. I just pay attention to every detail I can.
But if you're on an unfamiliar fishery, so like Oneida, this is the deal. I wasn't getting very many bites. You go out Tuesday night, and my co-angler, who hadn't, the same what I was telling you, hadn't college. The one
it was his first fish.
The one fish he catches, I'm dragging a drop shot offshore. He ties on a Fire Tiger wigglewort, and a 4-pounder smokes it. And I look back, I look down at my graph, and I immediately am like, start assessing. Why did that fish there? What was there? What was all about it? So then I tie on another crankbait and go back and catch one close to 5 and another 4. And then I said, well, if they're there. So then I idled over the spot where I caught them. And I was like, what is this? And then I was like, this spot over here is similar to where that was. I make one cast and catch a 4. Now, it didn't pan out in the tournament, but like I sat there probably, and I asked him a million questions, and I did it, but I spent a lot of time trying to figure out 6 or 7 different things as to why that happened. Because they were slacklining it, right? They weren't like slapping it. So like you'd be cranking it, it'd go weak, and they'd have it all the way down. So that tells me that they're like actively feeding. Like that is what they're targeting.
Choking. Yeah.
It's not something's running past and they're slapping at it. Like everything's front treble hook. So I'm like, this might last. This is something that they do regularly.
They do that, especially on Oneida.
But it took me probably a half an hour to feel comfortable with pulling up to a spot and going, there should be one here. And do you do that too in practice when you're trying to do a pattern? I'll pull up to a spot where I have not ever fished before. I've never caught him before. But in my mind, I'll go, I should catch one here.
Absolutely.
And that either solidifies the pattern or it tells you that there's still some elements that you're missing on it.
Yes.
Or you'll pull up to a spot and say, if I catch one here, I'm in trouble. Because based on what I have put together, there should not be a fish here.
Right. And you're 100% correct. The minute I start to hone in on what I think is a viable pattern, I start running it. And it's the same thing. I go, I should catch one on this cast. And then either boom, I got one, or no. But if I'm, especially with the smallmouth and Oneida, if I don't catch one on one place, I don't get panicky. I keep running it throughout the day to make sure, because what happens a lot of times is the smallmouth, if they're chasing bait, they're following bait. The bait's moving, predicated on the wind direction, because wind moves plankton. Right. Bait fish feed on plankton. The bait fish go where the plankton goes. The the bass go where the bait fish go, especially the smallmouths. And Oneida is a lake that can be relatively clear, and the smallies there rely a lot on sight feeding. So what happens is I found that a lot of times those smallmouth continue to move.
Right.
So unless they're buried in the boulders, they'll continue to move. So what I try to do is I go, okay, if I got 20 pounds on a crankbait, then I should be able to duplicate that. And so I'll run everything I can to figure it out. Some of the best tournaments I had happened exactly the way you described. I stumbled on the pattern in the tournament.
Yeah.
And so then I run this pattern on places I've never even been before and wind up doing really good in the tournament. And then I just pattern fish, and I fly by the seat of my pants the entire tournament and let the fish dictate to me where I got to go and what I have to do. I don't panic when I find them on rock piles, offshore shoals, or channel ledges. I don't panic because there's enough stuff to keep fishing. I just don't die in a spot.
Mm-hmm. But that also works. I mean, you could do riprap, you could do docks, you could
absolutely.
I mean, it applies to anything. Like if I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, why have I fished 9 stretches of riprap and I get 3 bites and 50 yards on this stretch of riprap?
Right. What was different on that riprap?
And you sit there, you look at your map, you look around, you try to figure out something different, and then go try to find more of it immediately.
Right.
All
right. Write this down.
So what do you do? So here's my question then. It's all about feedback, right? So in order to identify a pattern, you have to be getting feedback, whether it's negative or positive feedback. You're always getting feedback. But when you're getting negative feedback, as in you're not getting bit at all, like 0 bites, to me, that's the most frustrating thing because you have nothing to build or go off of. And you can say, oh, well, I mean, now I know how not to catch him. But I mean,
that's
there's a lot of guys who go out and get 0 bites. Like, how do you,
what do you
do when you're getting no bites?
I change everything I'm doing. I might make a complete location change in the lake and go for something completely different than what I've been fishing. And I've seen numerous times on some of these bigger reservoirs where there's a section of the lake that's going off, and there's a section of the lake that's like the Dead Sea. So I changed complete location because there's fish in the body of water. So if I fish all day and I literally don't have something, the next day I'm not duplicating anything I did. I'm running to a completely different section of the lake, maybe the flatter side of the lake, maybe the steeper side of the lake, maybe up the river. I'm doing something different for a little while to make sure that I'm not missing something important. Because not catching fish is still giving you clues and still telling you information, as long as you don't get so discouraged where you're just casting instead of paying attention. There was a tournament, a Bassmaster event on Lake Erie, where I went to some of my premier offshore stuff and didn't catch a single keeper in 3 days. And I'm like, there's something really wrong here. So I had slid up shallow, and I mean shallow. And I started sight fishing, and not spawners. I can see them big brown torpedoes cruising the cracks in the slate. And I would fire a drop shot in front of them, and it would hit the bottom, and they would smolder it. And I'm like, oh my God, I can get 23, 24 pounds easy doing this. That's what I'm doing. So I started idling up the banks, looking for this flat slate with the cracks in it. I said, okay, I got enough to go on. I got enough to get me through the tournament. Problem on Lake Erie is when they're that shallow, wind could kill you and boat traffic can kill you. So I run out there the first day of the tournament, and I stay on the cracks, and I keep trying to make it happen, and I come in with 10.5 pounds. In a Bassmaster event on Lake Erie, my first day, 10.5 pounds. I'm out. I'm out of the tournament. There is no way in God's green earth I'm going to win this event, because how am I going to make up that kind of weight? when guys are catching them, they're still going to be catching them, the guys that are catching them. So the second day of the tournament, I run back to the area where I was catching them on the slate, and I said, okay, I tell my non-boater, have a seat. We're going to idle around. If it takes me 4 hours to find something, we're going to find something, but I'm not stopping until I find something. I started idling, gradually going deeper and deeper and deeper, and I got out to about 29, 30 feet of water, and I found this little baby bump, and then on one side of the bump, it had a glacial scar on it where it was just vertical, and the bump was only 2 feet tall, and it was just vertical. And on that verticality part, I saw a fish, or at least what I thought was a fish on the bottom, and I saw 2 or 3 off the break. So I'm like, holy crap. So I put it in my GPS, and I start idling around in circles looking for more, and I found another one. Same thing, only a couple of fish on it. So I put it in the GPS. My non-boater's coming unscrewed. He's like, dude, we got a fish. I don't understand what you're doing, and blah, blah, blah. Well, I had found 4 of these, and I had been idling around for almost an hour. And I had found 4 of these. So I went back to the first one, dropped down on it, 4-pounder, 4-pounder. Went to the next one, 4-pounder, 4-pounder. Went to the next one, same thing, same thing. So I run in and I said, look, because you were patient with me, I have a place that I think that you can get 12 to 14 pounds. So I run to this place and we start whacking on them. And they're all decent fish, but they're not tournament winning fish. But at least he has an opportunity because he's going to come in with 14 pounds. So turns out he comes in with 16 pounds. So I'm like, okay, that might be a stop I'm going to make, put 5 in the boat tomorrow and then go call them all, because at least I got 5 in the boat. Turned out to me to be a bad decision, but I did it anyway. So the second day of the tournament, I run out there, I go to that spot, whack, whack, whack. I put 5 in the boat, run out to the deep stuff, start calling every single one of them. I go to my last bump and I go and I catch another one and I go to call. And when I go to call, all my locators went out. And I said, oh, it must have timed out. So I turned the key, and you know how the beep goes, you turn the key, and then I hit the button and the locators come back on. I go turn the key and it goes click, click. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? So I'm like, I don't understand what happened because my equipment is meticulous. I don't get it. So the first thing, I start ripping through the boat, looking at every fuse I could find. All the fuses are okay. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. So long and short of it is, I lost 2 hours of that day. Okay. I finally got the boat started and I couldn't fish anymore. I had to take the batteries apart and swap crank battery and jump the big motor to get the big motor running. So then I had to go in because the wind started blowing, waves started picking up. By the time we went back in, we were in solid 5-footers going back, and I had 17, 18 miles left to go to get back. So I had to go in. So I wound up going in early because I didn't have a choice. I tried to fish in the bay and catch some fish in the bay with the motor running before the tournament ended, but I didn't have a choice. Well, I come into the tournament, long and short of it is, I go from 86th place to 4th in that event because I changed everything I was doing because whatever I was doing wasn't right. And so that's what you have to do. You have to have the gumption to make that decision. And it's a huge decision because you are literally, now you are putting all your eggs in a basket of the unknown. But sometimes you have to, because what you know isn't working. So you have to take that gamble. And look, sometimes it's going to pay off huge and sometimes it's not. But you can't ignore it. If what you're doing isn't working, you can't ignore that.
All right. Another question, going back to the hardwood. James wants to know, is weather a factor? You know, when weather comes in or the weather changes, do you stick with the same deal? Do you stay with the hardwood, or do you start over if conditions change? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so changing weather conditions is a real tricky beast to talk about, because if you're fishing shallow or if you're fishing deep, there's a lot of things predicated on the weather. Wind generated current. If I'm flipping blowdowns, hardwood, willows, whatever it is, and when I was getting on all those fish, if the wind was on those banks, and let's say the weather changes and now the wind is not on those banks, it's somewhere else, flipping fish will usually stay. The flipping fish aren't going to go, oh, the wind stopped, I'm going to go swim across the lake to the other side. They'll usually stay there. Will the bite be as good? It might be as good. It might be better. It might not be. So if I go back there and the conditions have changed and I'm not catching them good, then I go try to find conditions that were duplicate of what I caught. So maybe the wind was on that area. So now I'll go to a different area where the wind is on them. And maybe it was the wind that made them more active. The flipping fish are not leaving. Offshore fish have a tendency to move with weather changes, or at least change their behavior. Okay, offshore fish, I have seen calm, slick, sunny days that put the fish right on the bottom, right in the structure. So now your football jigs, your Carolina rigs, it's going to be money. I've seen where the wind picks up, the clouds come in, the fish they come off the bottom, and now they're ready to eat something. And then all of a sudden the crankbait bite turns on. So weather will change the behavior of the fish. Flipping fish, not so much location, but it can change their mood.
All right, there you have it. A lot of weather questions on there.
Yeah, weather's tricky.
Hey, here's one that I've ran into. I ran into it on Lake of the Ozarks. I've run into it on a number. It's like a mid-afternoon bite, so you haven't figured out anything till like 2 or 3, and you got a 4 o'clock check-in. Like, is that not like just a nightmare scenario? I remember on Lake of the Ozarks, I had to wait till these shadows got up, and I caught everything, and I had a 3:30 check-in, everything from 2 to 3:30.
In the shadow.
You had to sit there for 6 or 7 hours and know that, okay, my entire window is going to be like, how do you deal with that for the first, when for 3 days of practice, you haven't caught anything till the afternoon? How do you approach that tournament days then in the morning?
I always try to find fish I can catch. But if you can't, and you have to, and you are predicated on a time frame, you have to fish absolutely flawlessly. Yeah. And you have to cover water as much as you can, because you need every bite you can muster up within that mini window of opportunity. And that's a tricky game to play, but sometimes that's the truth. I mean, sometimes that's just how it goes down. And you just have to maximize efficiency and time.
You know, Matt, let me ask you, this year and the previous years that you fished the Opens, has this been something that has been difficult to overcome when it comes to, I think everybody knows what you like to do and what you feel your strengths are, when you are practicing, not to refer back to those strengths and listen to what is being told by what's happening during practice? How challenging has that been for somebody like yourself?
I mean, I've had a game plan of what I would be happy with, like for each tournament day, like going into it. And fortunately, in all 5 of the events, I felt like I found what I was looking for in each one of those. So it hasn't, you know what I mean? Like I've always found what I felt were quality fish that were safer fish, and I chose to go with a little bit safer and solid fish than to go for top 10 fish that I felt were less consistent. And each time going in, I felt like I had consistency with opportunity. And those are really the 2 things that you're looking for, in my opinion, when you're fishing a 7, 8, 9 tournament circuit for points. Consistency with opportunity. Because if you can be consistent and you put yourself in position for something special to happen, you do that enough times, it's going to happen, while you're also mitigating the risk of total disaster by controlling the controllable variables and not kind of chasing something that may or may not happen. So, I mean, I really have not had any of those quote unquote mental issues this year where I'm like, do I do this or do I do that? Like, I have found myself in areas that I feel comfortable in, that I feel like has the opportunity to catch him.
All right, Frank. So it sounds like it's a mix It's a mix between obviously doing your homework before the event starts.
Yeah.
Then listening to what the fish are telling you and trying to combine what they're telling you with what you feel confident in doing on the water, and that may or may not be tied into your strengths. Is that a good evaluation?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. I mean, I rely on my strengths when I can, and when I can't, I can't. I don't. I mean, I'm not a conservative fisherman. I never have been. There are times when, like here, first perfect example, the last Bassmaster event in 2010, I had the points pretty much locked up. All I needed to do is catch a couple of fish and I win the points. I only need one bite and I guaranteed to go to the Classic. So my initial thought process behind it was, okay, I'm going to play it safe. We're on Lake Erie. I don't need anything bad to happen. I'm going to run to one of the harbors. I'm going to go catch 5 little largemouth and call it a day. I'm going to win the points and I'm going to make the Classic. It'll be the most conservative thing I've ever done in a tournament. And I was actually almost okay with it. Yeah. Then the closer we got to the tournament, I said, what in God's name am I thinking? We're on Lake Erie. I'm going out and smashing smallmouth. Forget about this. So I went out and I really fished hard to find smallmouth, and I found them. Mm-hmm. I found good numbers of them too. And I went out in the tournament with one mission and one mission only, and that's to win it. At that point, I didn't care. You know what I mean? I didn't care. I didn't care about winning the points. I was still going to make the Classic. All I needed was one bite to make the Classic, and I didn't care. I'm going to go win this event. And I almost did. I mean, I wound up in third. I almost won it, but I can't lay back. That's my personality. It's not right or wrong. It's just my personality. I'm not one to, if I know I can catch 9 pounds, I want 15. If I know I can catch 15, I want 20. I'm a greedy SOB, man. So I have a hard time doing the conservative approach for consistency. But in the bass fishing game, consistency is the name of the game. The more consistent you are, the better your points are going to be. And here, let's be honest. If you're going for consistency, you're playing the points game. And you're fishing for points. And there's a lot to be said for that. So I wouldn't discredit anybody for fishing for points. I don't fish for points. I fish to win, and let the chips fall where they fall. That's just my personality.
Yeah. You know, I get it, man. It's good stuff. And I think a lot of people out there, when I look back at some of the red mans, I'm dating myself.
Yeah. Yeah, you are.
The preconceived impression or notions or whatever you want to call it on what you need to do, they listen to what's taking place off the water, not on the water.
Yeah, that was the hardest thing for me to overcome when I first started fishing Bassmasters.
Yeah.
You hear so much BS, and you can't decipher the truth from the BS. And I would get spun out, completely spun out.
Here's the litmus test, and I found this to be true for the last 5 years for me. You can't convince yourself you're on them. You either know it or you're not. But here's the deal. If I am around guys that are talking about it and stuff, and I truly don't give a crap what they're saying or care about it or saying, whatever, do what you got to do. I know what I'm doing. I could care less on what they're thinking, what they're saying. If you overhear something, if someone tells you something, you're like, oh, that's cool. You're catching them on that. Good for you. Dude, you're on them. You understand what's going on. You're confident. If you're going, oh, wait, so you are putting chartreuse on that tail? Or it's 13 to 15 is where you say? Or what type of grass was that? Or you hear someone in the booth next to you at Applebee's talking and you're like, oh, yeah, I need to tie that spinnerbait on tomorrow. That's like, you're screwed. Because you don't have confidence in your pattern, and you cannot fake that. Like, that's one thing where you roll up and you're just like, yeah, I I don't care what other people are doing, because you've got something that you've listened to the fish and you're doing it, and you're not looking for a shortcut or what you're missing. When you've got your ear open and this is affecting you, you're missing a piece of the puzzle, and you're trying to grasp at anything to find that piece. So that means you need to go out the next day of practice and work, try to figure it out. That's just from my experience that I found. Like, that's how I could sit there and I could have had 25 pounds that day. But if someone is like, burr, 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 and you're like, oh, really? Oh, and you're trying to do it. Nope, not on them.
Yeah, you second guess yourself, and then you're screwed because
you're
do that all day.
You're looking at other people's boats, seeing what they have tied on.
Well, no. That's what I want to ask, Matt. Frank, back in the day, I remember the legend Harold Allen, when Matt I and Harold were doing this stuff. He would call it rubbernecking. Yeah. Right? And everybody's
on that. Like, you're not going to catch him if you're rubbernecking.
Yeah, he'd call it rubbernecking, just like what people do on the highway. But I know for a fact, and I want to get your opinion on this, I know for a fact that there were some guys that would purposely put certain rods and reels with baits on the front deck of the boat when they were coming to the weigh-in. Is that true or not true in your opinion?
No, it's 100% true. I used to put everything away. When I would come in, I would put everything away. In the morning, I wouldn't take a rod out till they started getting close to my boat number. Because we're all superstitious to a degree. I mean, we have to be. We gamble our lives away for a sport. So, I used to do stuff like that all the time. There was a tournament that I was fishing, a local event, and I put 12 rods out on the front of my boat in the morning and left them laying out there, and left the boat where everyone could go to it. And by the time the tournament started, I had one rod on my deck, and I won the crap out of that event. I beat him by like 9 pounds. And when I came in, I hear the guys talking at the weigh-in. I saw the buzzbait out. I saw him get that, fat free shad 7 on there, and then here the thing I caught them all on was a super fluke back in the day when it first came out. And it was just hilarious. And because I've got wrapped up in that too. I heard people talking at some of the events, and I'd be like, oh my God, they're catching 40 a day. You know what I mean? And I go, 40 a day? I'm catching like 10. You know what I mean? And then it turns out that they're catching 40, but they're all pound and a half. And I'm catching 10, and they're all 3 to 4 pounders or 3 to 5 pounders. So it took me a minute, but I got rid of all of that. And by the time, my first year on the Elite Series was a fabulous year for me, because I never was on any one of those bodies of water, and I wound up cashing a check in, I think, every event but 2 or 3. And so it gave me the confidence to know that a bass is a bass, and that all I got to do is just shut up, focus, and go fishing, and not worry about all the stuff. And I quit roommating with people too, because I would get, I did. I did, Matt, you're honest. I wasn't a hermit socializing. Like, we went out, we had beers, we had food, you know what I mean? I hung out with everybody, but I wouldn't talk about fishing. We would talk about our kids, whatever, our boats, whatever, but I would not talk about fishing, because I didn't want anything to lead me astray. Mm-hmm. And it got so bad that, I literally would wipe myself out, because I would be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? I know that guy likes to fish like this, and he's catching 40, and I'm only, and I would start second guessing everything I was doing. And the minute you start doing that, you stop paying attention to what the fish are telling you, and you're done for the event. And so I quit rooming with people, and I'm like, that's it. I'm doing it.
Here's what I found. This is the best way, and I firmly believe this. And it's from covering it for so many years and now fishing so much. It's fine to talk with other people, but here's the extent of which I talk with, outside of like Bradley Hallman, who we share information. And this is for a multiple day tournament, but you can do it for a single day. How much is it going to take? How much do you think it's going to take to cash a check? Or how much do you think it's going to take to make a top 10? And how much do you think it's going to take to win?
100%.
And you have in your head that, and I have found, and you can do this. This is actually one of my secrets for fantasy fishing. It's amazing how everyone who fishes all the way different will say, I 12 and a half a day, so 25 pounds to cash a check, and 17 a day will win it. And you start getting a feel for it, and then you have in your head what it is. Now, you have no idea how those people are catching fish. You could be offshore smallmouth fishing, they could be up shallow largemouth fishing.
Right.
But you'll start to see a pattern. So, like, I did that with Greg Mansfield at this last Open, and I thought 20, 24 to cash a check, 16, 17 a day to win. And I have no idea what he's doing. And he said 29 to cash a check. I said, dude, you're either smoking crack or you're guaranteed a top 10. Sure enough, the guy finished 6th place.
Yeah.
It's a great litmus test, just those two simple things that don't put any outside influences in your head, but also give you a good understanding of how that fishery is fishing. And based on what you think it's going to take, you can talk to a bunch of people without talking fishing and still get an understanding of what
right.
And it's usually within a pound. Like, very rarely is it. And, unless you're like at Cumberland in the Toyota series, I was like, I think it might take 18, 19 a day to win and like 13 or 14 a day to cash a check. And I said that at the dinner table at the meeting, and like guys looked at me and went, what lake are you on? Well, I hadn't talked to anybody else, and that's when I realized, okay, I might be on something pretty special, and I finished 3rd in that event, right?
Right. That's 100% accurate. I always want to figure out how much it's going to take to win an event, because that's going to give me a gauge on what my performances are in practice or what I think I can catch. And that's what I generally focus on. So I research a lake before I go down there. I look at every tournament in the last 3 or 4 years that were on that lake during that time frame and what it took to win. Because if I know that I need 23 pounds a day to win and I'm catching 10, I'm in deep trouble. You know what I mean? So at least I have a gauge on what kind of weight it takes to win. So then in my practice, I know where I got to keep tweaking until I get into that range. And that's pretty much the only information that I really look for on lakes. Because you know what? Patterns change. Hell, dude, look, patterns change sometimes by the hour. And so if you sit there and go, well, last year it was one on, rock piles and 3 feet of water, so I know exactly where I'm going. Well, you could be barking up the wrong tree, because that pattern might have been predicated on weather conditions prior to the event, or flooding water, and then they were dropping the water. I mean, that pattern could have been predicated on a million things that aren't going to happen when you're there. So I try to look at what weights it takes to win it. Then I know how I'm doing in practice, and then I know that I got to do some more work, or I'm doing the right work, and hallelujah.
All right, Matt, we're well over an hour.
Yep.
I know you said you had to go. You got to get somewhere.
I'll leave you too for the last say. That was very educational today, Uncle Frank.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Matt, have fun with playing Green Acres this afternoon.
Yeah. Say hello to Mr. Haney for us, okay?
Mr. Haney.
All right, y'all have a good afternoon, morning,
See you, buddy.
It is.
All right.
See ya. Hey, I got to get with you for the St. Lawrence River. You got to teach me how to use a drift sock, man.
Yeah.
Call me.
Yeah.
We're in. All right, man.
All right.
See ya.
See.
Hey, for those people that may not be aware, he's going to haul there's 500 bales of hay today.
Yeah.
That's brutal, man.
Yeah, especially in that heat.
Yeah, it's special hay. It's not the round hay. Do you guys have the round hay up there?
Dude, I don't. It's all brown and dead to me. What the heck do I know? Cows and horses eat the stuff. You'll have to ask.
It's special hay. I don't know what's so special about it, but
you'll have to ask my camera guy, because he did. He baled 2,000 bales of hay a couple weeks ago.
2,000?
Yeah, some crazy number. I don't know. Maybe 2,000 or 200. I don't know what he did. It was a whole lot. And then he goes, "I'm going to be a little bit late at the ramp." I go, "Why?" He goes, "I got to deliver 50 bales before I come to the ramp." I'm like, "Okay, go ahead." Just don't call me to lift all that hay.
All right, man. A couple of things real quick. Got to let everybody know, next week we're doing PM shows, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, because of the certification classes that I have to go to for my teaching credentials. But we will still have day 4 next week at the regular time. It's just Monday and Tuesday, no show on Wednesday. And then we'll do day 4 again next week at the same time, our regular 8:30 a.m. Frank, I want to wrap up the show with this. I received a few emails from people that sent me a link to a very, very interesting story that was in the Chicago Tribune about the Bassmaster Classic that took place 21 years ago in the town of Chicago.
We're digging down deep, Mark.
Yeah, 21 years ago. Woo Daves won it.
Yes, he did.
And this was my first one was 98, so 98, 99. This was my third classic that I had been to. And I remember sitting in Soldier Field in the upper deck looking down and seeing about, 400, 500 people, and that's it.
Yeah,
there was nobody there.
The show venue wasn't much better in that event either. I was there working for a lure company, and that was the first classic that I had ever actually attended. And that is the classic that I said, I'm doing this.
Yeah,
I'm doing it. I can't sit back and watch people do what I want to do, so I got to go do it. That was a bizarre venue because I've been to Chicago a ton. It's hard to get around in the city with a vehicle, and it wasn't user-friendly. Let's call it that. It wasn't user-friendly. It's not the fact that it was up north, and it's not the fact that, Lake Michigan sucks as a fishery, because it doesn't. It was the venue. And then what I had found out later was that they had made a bunch of things off limits where the anglers could have easily fished with inclement weather. So they literally pinned them to a small, they cut off their run. They wouldn't let them out of the Chicago city limits, if I'm not mistaken, or some limit. They cut off the runs they could make. They cut off some of the marinas that they could fish in. And so the only thing I can liken it to is like this. If you're in a football game and then they come out and they tell you, you can no longer use the right side of the field.
Yeah, that's not good.
You're like, what? You know what I mean? And so that's kind of what they did. And it was, and I would say it was, I'm going to call it a monumental failure, but it wasn't really a failure. It made them look at, it made them analyze other parts of this equation. And subsequently, since then, each classic got better and better and better because they realized logistically where they can do the classic and where they can't do the classic. And if the classic is going to put so much emphasis on the show, not the fishing part, but the show being the show, the tackle show, the expo is going to be this great venue, then they have to make it easy for people to get to it. And they did that, and they learned that by Chicago. So I don't think as much as a failure as that article and everything was saying, I don't think so. I think it was a great learning curve for Bassmasters, and they capitalized on it because they have not made that mistake again.
They actually had ICAST in coordination with the Classic that year, too, which was, they've never done that again.
No.
Yeah.
No, because ICAST is about bringing in new lures, new products, new things into the fishing world, where the expo is about showing companies in the industry and some non-endemics showing their wares. A lot of venues sell stuff at the Classic. It's more of a family-friendly show at the Classic.
Well, here's the other thing. And Matt and I have talked about this for a number of years about how successful the Pittsburgh Classic was. Another metropolitan area, kind of in the north, obviously. But that Classic, even though the fishing was just brutal.
It was abysmal.
It was unbelievable. The crowds that show up and the victory and how everything was done in that big city area. That Pittsburgh was one of the most drama events that they've had in a Bassmaster Classic, and the fishing was horrible, but the crowds were awesome. The River Walk, or whatever it's called. What is it called? Is it the River Walk?
I'm not sure.
I think it is the River Walk. I don't know. The takeoff, the one day that I went to the takeoff in Pittsburgh, it was standing room only.
Oh, yeah.
It was unbelievable how many people showed up for the takeoff and watched the guys go down through that point area with, at the time, I don't know what it was called back then, Three River Stadium.
Yeah.
Or one of the stadiums, Heinz Field, whatever it's called. Was right across the way from that river. It was unbelievable, the crowd participation in that event. The thing about Chicago, Frank, I can remember walking around just outside, because there was a harbor right there, just randomly saying, "Hey, how's it going? What's going on at Soldier Field? What? There's something going on. The Bears playing. Just weird responses, and nobody really knew what was taking place."
Yeah, I mean, Chicago has such a fabulous population of people that live within the city.
Yeah.
Most of those people are there because of the city life and because of their jobs, and their recreation might be boating, not necessarily fishing. You have to pick venues where people play in the outdoors. That's just what brings the people in. Like the Pittsburgh area. I mean, you look at, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, New York, it's all a stone throw from there. And they're hunters and fishermen, and they want to be outside. You know what I mean? They want to do things that are, out there. So they got the crowds, and they were actually in an area with a lot of outdoor activity and close proximity. I mean, here, look, you're talking only a couple hour drive from some of the best fishing and hunting in the country. So it was a really good venue. And here, look, I don't mind having a classic that's not a slugfest. I don't mind that. I mean, let's be honest, dude. I mean, the harder it is to catch fish, the more exciting the more exciting it becomes, because now it's a game of ounces, and it's a game of decisions, and one tiny mistake, one lost fish could cost you everything. And so that's what really, gets you excited, is when it's, when it's right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I put the link on the comments there on the YouTube page in case you want to check out that story. I thought it was the Tribune I think it was a magazine in Chicago, so that's my bad on that. All right, last thing, got an email from a fan, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, but this might be something that you can check on. His question is in reference to the DD22, and he wants to know, were there vintage versions of these baits? Because I guess he goes into his local tackle store and he found some DD22s that were the old packaging style, and it seems like that there were colors, and this particular color, he said, was Tennessee shad, that he can't find anywhere else. Is there something similar to that Tennessee shad color? And what's the value of these vintage DD22s? Are there stuff floating around out there that are sought after from a DD22 standpoint, Frank?
Any DD22 is a good DD22 in my book. The DD22s, most of them are gel-coated baits. They cast great. They run great. They're made out of butyrate plastic. They sound fantastic. The low, dull, thuddy sound resonates really well in a fish's lateral line. As far as the value of the old vintage ones goes, I don't know. I can't tell you that with any kind of intelligence. I just don't know.
Have you heard about that color, though?
Tennessee shad, I mean, there's a lot of
standard.
Yeah, there's a lot of variations of Tennessee shad. There's Tennessee shad, like Bomber has Tennessee shad, Citrus, Tennessee shad. Everybody's got a Tennessee shad. I don't know what the hue ranges are on the old version of the DD22's Tennessee shad is. I can tell you this, they'll still run good. They'll still catch fish. Those baits were bulletproof. And so are the ones made today, because they're the exact same bait. Nothing has changed on them except for colors get discontinued and new colors get added. It's still the same fish catching bait it always was.
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite brands was Norman. I mean, I live and die by Norman, and I live and die by Bomber Fat Free Series. I can't help it. I mean, those are just my favorite crankbaits.
Hey, is it hard to imagine out there that some of the young anglers probably have never thrown a DD22?
Yeah, it freaks me out a little bit. 'Cause
Yeah.
when I was coming up, Norman was so popular that you could actually buy them in a gas station. And here's the crazy thing. Norman Baits was the first lure of its kind to name a bait predicated on a depth it dives. Now they call it the DD22, but it didn't dive 22 feet. It dives right around 18, 17, 18. But they called it a DD22. And that was one of the first crankbaits ever named based off of depth. And they had the DD22, the DD14, so they were kind of cutting edge on giving it a depth name.
Yeah.
And it spawned a lot of other lures now with depths, but still the greatest crankbaits ever made.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you. I can't tell you how much money I won on those. I don't even know. I mean, I don't know. It's just one of my all-time. Like I said, Norman is one of my favorites, and the Bomber Fat Free Series, my favorites. I can't help it.
I would really like to see and ask some collegiate anglers or high school anglers, hey man, do you know what a DD22 is? How many times have you used a DD22?
Yeah, dude, I would be so interested. I would be so interested to hear that because, I mean, let's be honest, dude. There's a lot of lure companies out there that have all the sexy names and all the, all the sparkle and shine. But when it comes to meat and potatoes, there's nothing beats Norman.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Frank, great stuff. If you came in halfway through the show, make sure you go back, listen to the replay, because there was some really, really good info there from Frank, as always, on day 4. And we'll be here same time next week on Thursday. And remember, as I mentioned, night shows next week, Monday and Tuesday. No show on Wednesday.
But
because
not
of this.
Day 4.
But not day 4. Man, here's the certification schedule. It's 2 sides, Frank. It's a lot. I'm going to be wore out by Thursday of next week, man. And then school starts on Thursday. Man, it's just kind of crazy.
You're going to be so happy to see all those kids' smiling little faces.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Frank.
Hey, anything for you, man.
Yeah. All right, folks, that's going to wrap up another great day 4 with Frank. Thanks to Matt. He had to leave early, go bale some hay or move some hay or whatever he's got to do. Make it. So, but we will be back on Monday night, 7:30 p.m. on Monday, Central Time, right here on BTL. So thanks to everybody. Great questions today. And Frank, we'll talk to you next week, man.
Adios.
That's it. We're out of here.